Good afternoon and welcome to this installment of the Women in Neutron Sciences Lunch and Learn series. We're fortunate to have with us today Ms. Sharron King, who was the first X-ray and neutron science data acquisition programmer at ORNL. Before we begin, I have just a few housekeeping items. First, please keep your video and microphone off or muted throughout the proceedings. We ask that you refrain from using the chat function so we can avoid the distraction of notifications. We will use the meeting notes feature to collect questions, which will be read off at the conclusion of Sharron's presentation. If you're joining us from outside of ORNL, you may not have that meeting notes feature, and in that case, you can submit it through chat, but otherwise, please use meeting notes. Today's Lunch and Learn was made possible by the suggestion of Dr. Jaime Fernandez-Baca and the cooperation and efforts of Sharron King and Tina Snyder. And now Jaime will provide us an introduction.
Thank you, Melissa. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome Sharron King. Sharron King is a pioneer in her field, and I will say just a few words to put things in context. I don't want to steal from her talk, and I know you are anxious to listen to her. So Sharron got her degree in mathematics at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and she came to work at the mathematics division at ORNL in the 1960s. So let me put a little context to that. It was not many years before that Cliff Scholl and Ernie Wollan had worked in the development of neutron scattering at ORNL. And that attracted a lot of people to the lab, that they were interested in the new possibilities of the scattering. And among these was a group of very talented chemists that included a guy called Peter Levy and Bill Busing. So they saw the potential of the diffraction in crystals, but they knew the limitations, that there was not a good way to analyze many reflections of the crystals because it was a manual operation. So they developed the so-called the UV formalism that still is being used in crystallography to align single crystals and determine the axis of the crystals. And they asked for the help for somebody who had expertise to be able to use computers to be able to automate this single crystal goniometer that they had. And so that's when Sharron came on board. She became part of the team that made possible the first automated four-circle goniometer that really was a revolution in the way that crystallography is made. Okay, the crystallography in the way we know it wouldn't be possible because of the work of this team that included Sharron King and Bill Busing and Peter Levy. So this was such a success that the neutron diffraction guys at the HIFER, they immediately requested that her to be helping. So she joined the work at the HIFER, and she will show you pictures and things of all her experiences working at the HIFER. She was the data acquisition specialist, and she implemented all the data acquisition systems at the HIFER. And when I came in 1986 to the lab, because of her skills and talent, she has made herself indispensable in the solid state division. I know that the theorists love her because she has become the system manager for the mainframe computers, and all the theorists wanted her help in running their codes in the troubleshooting Fortran codes and things like that. So she was in high demand, and that she was a very important member of the solid state division because of all those contributions. So I won't say any more, just that it is a pleasure and an honor to introduce you, Sharron King. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaime.
Thank you. And as Sharron gets her presentation ready, just a reminder to keep mics and cameras off so that we can reduce any bandwidth load and hopefully have a smooth presentation. One interesting learning point is that apparently when you start recording a meeting, the meeting notes function goes away. So we will use the chat function. If you have any questions, you can submit those through chat. Sharron, just take it away when you're ready.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I don't know who all is out there, but I'm surprised to see that there are people who are not at the lab who can look in. I didn't expect that. That's great, whoever figured out how to do that. I'm going to just talk about my years of experience at the lab and some of the people and some of the events that were really meaningful to me. So,
Sharron,
yes.
this is Melissa. You need. We're not seeing your full presentation. We're seeing your editing slide.
Let me go first to, let's see, I'll say play, and maybe then go to, I've got to go then and share that to, no, let's see. It's going to shift tab. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
Let's see.
Did you share your whole desktop?
That's probably what I did wrong. No,
Okay.
Let me do that again then. I'll stop sharing and go back and say, share my desktop. Desktop, here it is. Now I'm on my desktop and I'll hit play. Now
we have the slide. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your help, Melissa. We
No
wouldn't
problem.
be able to do this without you and all the other people who've helped. I wanted to start by telling you that I am not a person who plans ahead. I felt like all my life I've been lucky. I've been in the right place at the right time. And things just worked out for me as if I had planned them, but I hadn't. It's really been great. I want to tell you that after I graduated from high school, I entered the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And I majored in mathematics because I was good at math. And I really had no idea what kind of job would be available to me after college. I thought probably teaching. But during my years at UT, there was a man named Harvey Carter. He was a member of what was called then the math panel. It was the people who actually started using computers, started making computers available here at Oak Ridge National Lab. Harvey Carter arranged an interview for me at the lab, and I was hired as a computer programmer. That was really wonderful. I had never had any classes in computers at all at UT, but my last quarter there was a Fortran course that I took, and I loved it. I liked the language. It made sense to me. So within 1 month in 1964, I graduated from high school and went to UT. And then, I'm sorry, I graduated from UT. That same month, I got married. and I started working at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I also turned 21 at that time. So a lot of really important life events happened for me in that short period of time. But the job was actually a perfect fit for me because my husband, Phil, was going to be at UT for several more years. It was taking him longer because he was on a co-op program where he alternated working at AEDC, Arnold Engineering Development Center in Tullahoma. He would work there one quarter and then come and go to classes at UT for the next quarter. So that worked out just perfectly for us. We could see each other on the weekends, and he could do his co-op work and I could work at the lab. But the next, let's see, my first few days or weeks at the lab, I wrote programs in Fortran. This is an example of a little Fortran program. That's what the printer output looked like at that time. We had to write a program. You wrote by hand on this 80-column Fortran coding form. It mattered what column you put things in too. So we would send that Fortran coding form to the key punch operators who would produce a deck of cards that had the source code on them. Then that source code had to be sent to be compiled, and then you had a binary deck, and finally you had what you needed to execute on the computer. This is an example of a deck of cards. You see that diagonal line drawn across the top. That was in case you dropped it. And then you could have a chance of being able to put it back in the right order. And it was very time-consuming and slow to get anything done. So next, my first actual assignment or project at the lab was with the group that included Henry Levy, Carol Johnson, and Bill Busing. Bill Busing made things really easy for me. He drew flow charts of what the program was supposed to do, which made it quite simple, really, to translate into assembly language code. And then we used a PDP-5, which was one of the first small computers at the lab. It was the first affordable small computers. Usually the price had been around $100,000, but this one was $20,000. So the chemistry group could afford to get one for their use. This shows me sitting at the teletype machine with the main INC person, Ron Roseberry, and one of the scientists in the group, Ray Ellison. And there's Bill Busing in the background with me at the keyboard. So that worked out really well. Bill was an extremely clever person. He set up a phone so that the experimenters could call from home and listen to a Morse code signal to be able to tell what was happening at the instrument. And that, of course, was a very useful feature. But at the Christmas time, Bill arranged for the tone to play Christmas songs instead of the Morse code signal. Let's see, where do we go next? Since computer programming was actually a very new field, there were a lot of women hired to be programmers as well as men. There were a group of women who became good friends, who had office space in the attic above the C corridor of 4500 North. We had a lot of fun together, both at work and outside of work. And at lunchtime, we would play bridge. That's where I learned to play bridge. It was a good experience. Well, after we got the X-ray diffractometer working, the neutron scattering group, which was at the high flux isotope reactor, we're going to install computer-controlled spectrometers using PDP-8 computers. Well, because of my experience with Bill, we're using on the PDP-5, that was an easy transition for me to work on the computers for the neutron scatterers. This is a kind of a group picture that shows a good many of the neutron scatterers. There was some kind of probably anniversary ceremony going on for Ray Child, but there also is Bob Nicklow in the picture in the back, Wally Kohler. Costa Stasis was from Iowa State. Joe Cable. There's Ralph Moon back there, and John Cook and Mike Wilkinson, who weren't at the HIFER, but they were very important in the division. This is a picture of Wally Kohler and me at the HB1 beam, that it's a big instrument. It was impressive to see it in operation. You notice the danger sign there. That was actually an open beam that you had to be sure to avoid. And at the end of that is a beam stop. But it was a little bit dangerous, I would say. Another picture of HB1, that means horizontal beam 1. This is at the HIFER. Of course, I think it's still there. This is showing Ralph Moon and Wally Kohler and me again at the computer console. Well, in 1968, my husband, Phil, graduated from UT with a master's in physics, and shortly thereafter started working at Y12. Since Y12 was a defense contractor, did defense work for the Department of Defense, it offered something that was really important in those days, a deferment from the draft, so he didn't have to go to Vietnam. That was the fear of a lot of people around that time. So I stopped working for the first time. I retired the first time in 1969, almost 5 years exactly from the time I had started working at the lab. It was 1 month before my first son was born. And then in 1971, my second son was born. When I left there, I actually had no plan at all to return to work. I thought that was it. I was finished. But when my older son started to kindergarten and my younger son started to nursery school, around that time, Harold Smith, who you see in this picture, this is at HB3. Harold Smith contacted me because at the Heifer, they were going to be changing to different computers. And he wanted to know if I could help out with the needed changes. Well, it was on a contract basis, which meant I could work as little or as much as I wanted. And of course, I didn't work very much those years. But shortly thereafter, I went to work half-time, which was a little more controlled, well, more defined. I went to work half-time with the neutron scattering group. That was when my sons were in elementary school, and so they were in school most of the day, which made it possible for me to come out to the lab during the daytime. Well, let's see, and let's see, in 1983, this is the wide angle neutron detector. That's also at the Heifer. That was created by a joint cooperation between the Japanese Atomic Energy Group and Ray Child and me. That's Susumu Katano and Satoru Funahashi, both of whom were from Japan. And then there's Ray Child, who was part of the neutron scattering group. One of the best things about working at Oak Ridge was getting to meet people from all over the world. And I mean that literally. There were people from everywhere coming to use the instruments. So I really enjoyed being able to come in contact with people from all over. One night, Jaime Fernandez Baca had a party at his house where he had every continent represented. That was quite a significant event for me. Now, in 1984, my two sons were starting to were going into 7th grade and 9th grade. They were going to Webb School of Knoxville. And so I, at that time, decided to go back to work full time. Half of my time would be spent with the neutron scattering group, and the other half with the solid state division theory group. Mark Robinson was the person I dealt with most in the theory group. He was my mentor. He was really important for me at the time I was working there. Well, Mark was quite a stickler. We had some benchmarks run on both digital equipment computers and data general computers. And the data general computers worked better. Mark thought it was because the digital equipment people had made a mistake in how they ran the codes, but we ended up, to be fair, we ended up getting the data general computer. This was for the theorist. The theorists at that time had monitors on their desktops, and they would communicate with these monitors with the PDP-10, which was shared by the lab. So it was really hard to get things executed, completed, to get the calculations done that you need. So that's why the theorists decided to get their own computer. And that's what ended up being the data general computer. This is me and John Cook, who was head of the theory group at the time, in front of the data general tape drive. This is a group picture that includes a lot of the theorists. And it's Ted Kaplan, Harold Davis, Dean Owen, John Cook, Gerald Mahan, and there's Mark Robinson hiding behind the case there. One of the things that was a lot of fun for the Solid State Division was a softball team. They were known as the Stonefingers. It was part of a lab recreation league that was in effect at the time. They were supported by the contractor in a way, giving them equipment and things like that. But you can see that some of the neutron scatterers were on this team as well as the theorists. There's Ralph Moon and Bob Nicklow, neutron scatterers, and Ted Kaplan and Mark Mostaller, who were theorists. Here's another picture of Ted Kaplan, Mark Mostaller, and Jim Roberto. I'm sure most of you know Jim Roberto. He was on the team too. It was a team for a very long time, probably the longest lasting softball team there ever was at the lab. But with a new contractor, the support for recreational activities was not possible, and so they eventually had to disband. I don't know if I said, but that most, or if not all, of the men on the team were PhDs. That was a claim to fame for them. But they had to have at least 4 women on the team because it was a mixed league. So my office was right beside this display. I know that's a terrible picture, but it's all I had. The Stonefingers used it to post various things. It was right outside my door, as I said. They put up pictures of softball games. They also would send in postcards from their travels. Some of these postcards got to be a little risque. So Ted Kaplan, who was also one of the organizers of the Stonefinger team, came to me and said, did I mind having that bulletin board outside my door in my office in 3025. I said I didn't mind as long as people knew it wasn't my bulletin board. So Ted made a sign and displayed it prominently. This is not Sharron's bulletin board. And that stayed. I thought that was a very clever solution. We all had nicknames on the Stonefingers team. My nickname was Sweetness. Mark Mostaller was called Mad Dog. And Ted Kaplan was called No Hit. But we all had a nickname of some sort. And after every game, Mark Mostaller, the coach, would write up a memo of what had happened during the game, and it was always hilarious. He was a very good writer. Now, so, and let's see, I did more with the theorists. Eventually, personal computers were available, and so everybody had a personal computer in their office. We had a bigger fraction than most people in the lab of Macintoshes. I always felt like that was due to Bill Appleton, who was our director at the time, having a son who worked with Apple or Macintoshes. I may be wrong, though. That's just my suspicion. But we had a good mix of Apple computers and PC. So I was for the division. Now it had sort of changed. It was for more than just the theory group. For the whole division, I was a systems manager, the network manager, the computer security officer, and the person who was called whenever there was a problem, hardware or software. Of course, when it turned out to be hardware, we called in INC, but we had to figure out what it was first. But I got to know just about everybody in the division, of 100 people, through being the computer person for them. So in let's see, when was it? 2003, the Solid State Division was renamed the Condensed Matter Sciences Division. 2005, there was going to be a big reorganization of the lab, and the Solid State Division, or Condensed Matter Sciences Division, was going to be absorbed by the much larger Metals and Ceramics Division. I had gone through a lot of changes with hardware and software through the years, but I wasn't comfortable with changing people. I wanted to stay with my family of solid state people. So I decided to retire. I was old enough to start getting Social Security. I'd been at the lab for over 40 years. I decided to retire. So when it came close to time for me to leave, this was in 2005, one day I was working with one of the theorists, and Hans Christian came to me and said he needed some help in the auditorium. Well, I said I would be there as soon as I could, but I was still not finished with what I was doing. So he came back again, I think, and said he needed my help. So I went. And in the auditorium at 3025, there was a crowd of people, and I was presented with a homegrown computer, which was constructed by Jula Aries, Chris Rouleau, and Hans Christen. It was a lot of fun. Let me show you some of the details. You see the operating system was Microsoft Windows instead of Windows. Instead of the start button, it says crank it up, and there's a mobile home driving up the hill. That was the normal background for a Microsoft Windows computer, but not with the mobile home. This is the base for the monitor. It's an old log nailed to a piece of cardboard. The keyboard had most of the keys removed, except the ones that spelled out "thank you." That meant a lot to me. And then there were some actual keys attached to the keyboard. The manufacturer, instead of Dell, was dull. Instead of Intel inside, it said, "What in the hell's inside?" And the mouse was a mouse, and the mouse pad was from a carton of beer. The disk drive actually ejected, and it came out, and so that made a very handy cup holder. And then the decorations were a doily, a handmade doily, and a race car spoiler. The maintenance kit was a can of furniture polish. It was a wonderful experience. I still have this computer, a homegrown computer, in my den downstairs, still on display. I'm just really proud of it. It's so unique. So on the day of my actual retirement, the first thing that happened was a long white limousine arrived at my house to drive me to the lab. But before we were coming, the driver was instructed to go buy Krispy Kreme donuts in Knoxville and pick up several dozen hot, fresh donuts to bring with us. John Cook knew that was one of my favorite things to eat. We drove the long limousine on the main street of the lab to show it off as much as possible. When I got to 3025, there was John wearing a top hat. And I was also greeted by a group of people from the division out there too. It was really exciting. So a lot of us took turns coming into the limousine. And then after that, we went up into the auditorium where everybody had donuts and everyone sang "You Are My Sunshine" while John Cook played it on his banjo. It was a terrific send-off. I really am grateful for the affection shown by that whole group. So in retirement, I've done a lot of travel. I've been to India and Bhutan, Turkey, Nepal, Tibet, as well as most of the countries in Europe. I took advantage of a Tennessee program where the seniors can go to any state college with no charge and take any class that they want to. Well, I filled in a few gaps of my education by taking astronomy and philosophy and psychology and music appreciation. And I did a lot of classes of film studies. That's because my friend and I loved movies. So we could get to see a lot of free movies by going to the film studies class. On the day I retired, I think I went to 4 movies. I was determined not to ever miss one that I wanted to see. Now that I was retired, I would have the time to go to the movies. Well, and of course, sleeping late was a very important part of being retired. I'm not a morning person, but I loved sleeping late, and then I could sit at the table with my coffee and work on the puzzles that are in the daily papers. I just loved puzzles. So another big part of my retirement, of course, is my grandchildren. I have grandchildren in Toronto and in Los Angeles. We got to see them pretty often, as it turns out, even though they were far away. Every spring, the whole family would go together to wherever the Los Angeles Dodgers were doing their spring training, and we would spend a week together playing on the beaches or going to ball games. It was a wonderful thing to do. Well, and then we had a wonderful suggestion from our good friend Lee Riedinger. He and his wife took each of their grandchildren when they turned 13 on a trip out of the United States. Phil and I thought that was a brilliant idea. So we decided to do it with our grandchildren. Our oldest grandson is Adam. He lives in Toronto, and he picked Italy as the country he wanted to go to. I think in these pictures we're on a Segway trip. That's why we're wearing helmets. But it was of course a great experience for all of us. Our second grandson, Sam also lives in Toronto. He chose Africa. So we went to South Africa and also went to, maybe it's Zambia, where the famous falls are in Victoria Falls. But it was fantastic. Now our third grandchild is Chloe. Chloe, we decided to take Chloe on her trip when she was 10 years old, rather than wait till she was 13, because she was growing up so fast that by the time she was 13, we thought she might not want to go with her grandparents on a trip. So we went to Australia. And it was a great adventure for all of us. We were with a Rhodes Scholar group of grandparents and grandchildren. And of course, having other children there was perfect for Chloe. Well, I also volunteer at Children's Hospital every week as a cuddler. I get to hold babies, which is something I adore doing. I get to hold the newborn babies in the neonatal intensive care unit, just to comfort them. And I really can't think of anything I prefer doing over holding a baby. I've always been very fond of babies. Now, Phil and I decided that we were going to just have 2 children because at the time, Paul Ehrlich's book called The Population Bomb was very much in the news and being talked about. So we wanted to do our part in not having more than 2 children. We wanted to not add to the population boom. So that's why, even though I absolutely love children and babies, we had only 2. That's about, Phil's reminding me. I forgot to mention our most recent travels were to the Galapagos Islands, which is a wonderful experience. The animals know you're not going to hurt them, so they don't run away. You can get very close to them. And then this past New Year's, we went with friends to Vienna, Austria for a New Year's Eve ball. That was beautiful. Vienna is beautiful at that time of year. I had a lot of experiences at the lab, and I wouldn't change a thing. I loved it. It was a wonderful job for me. I was very lucky. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharron. We appreciate your presentation. That was wonderful. Okay, everybody. If you have any questions, if you'll just type a letter. Okay, here we go. Janice, if you want to turn on your video and microphone, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, we can do it that way.
Hi, Sharron. Janice Greenwood.
Oh, Janice, hi.
Hi,
And
how are
Sharron,
you?
would you please stop sharing your screen, please?
I need to stop sharing my screen. No, that was you. I clicked that.
Yes, ma'am.
Hold on just a second.
Everyone else, if you'll just put a letter into the chat function, I'll call on you as we go down the line, and you can do it as Janice is and share your screen and ask your question.
Melissa.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know how to stop sharing my screen.
I think you have.
Oh, great. Oh, good. Okay. Janice, hi.
Hi, Sharron. How are you?
What's happening at the lab?
Oh, working hard.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
So my question to you was, being the first female within the group, when you started back when, how many other females or how many other women was on your team?
There were, on the team, I would say none.
Okay.
But there were lots of other women who were programmers. You know, they were about equal in numbers, I think, with the men as programmers. We were part of the mathematics division, at the start. So.
And how many decks of cards did you drop?
That would have been disastrous, but I don't recall ever dropping one.
Oh, really? Okay. And was that the IBM 390 that you worked on, or the IBM 360?
360. The 360. Yes.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Janice.
Thank you, Janice. If you don't mind, please. Yep, great. Andrew, do you want to come on? Andrew Prezant?
Well, okay. Hi, Sharron.
Hey, Andrew.
Yeah, I actually don't have, as I post, I don't really have a question, but it's just fantastic. This is an amazingly good talk. And Jaime and I and Brian were talking, and so many people are new in neutron scattering, and they don't know you, and they don't know any of the contribution you made.
Yes.
To make news. And Mark Lumsden and I were talking the same thing, is when you did this stuff, everything was brand new.
Yes,
Nobody had done it before.
New. That's right. That's right. Right. But you know, the people who designed the programs probably had the hardest job. I just had to get them to go into the machine and do what they wanted. But I was very lucky to have that experience of being the first one.
I also suspect that any of the people that saw your presentation that are working at HIFER lately were just absolutely blown away at how much space there was at HIFER back in the day. We filled it all in now.
I would like to see it now. So there's a lot more equipment down there, huh?
Oh, we'll have to get you in for a tour with all this COVID stuff.
I would love to see it.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Thank you again.
Bye, Andrew. Good to see you.
Thank you. We have a comment from John Hamel. Would you like to turn on your video, or shall I just read it out, John?
I can turn on my video and audio.
Okay. Very good.
You guys see me? Hello. I'm just complete random stranger, but
Yes.
wow, that was an amazing talk. Like some of those pictures, the instrumentation and stuff were so cool.
Okay.
And the computer that you got when you retired was hilarious. That was amazing. You were some really funny people.
It was one of the first affordable computers. In fact, they didn't even want to call it Digital Equipments who made it. They didn't want to call it a computer. They wanted to call it a program data processor.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it was a computer.
Yeah. And he was complimenting your retirement computer as well.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
The wooden one, all the tiny little jokes and things like that built into it. That was
Actually,
amazing.
I have the mouse. Can you see
Mouse.
the mouse? Is right here. It was fantastic.
What I love the most about that computer is that it was done by 3 people who are not native Tennesseans.
Right.
It was the perfect Tennessee computer.
Lots of
Right? Yeah. The wood
stickers.
paneling, crank it up.
Right.
It was great.
All right. Thank you, John.
It just seems like you built a great community of people there. So
I did. It was marvelous.
Thank you, John.
thank you.
Brian Chakamakis, would you like to come on?
There's Brian.
Hello, Sharron.
Hi, Brian. How good to see you.
It's great to see you, not at a funeral.
I know. I know. It is.
But I wanted to know, in your history, did you also interact with the neutron scatterers or the X-ray scatterers that were working at the ORR? There
was a very brief time that I did something at the ORR, but it was not not much. But I do remember going there. The day I went there, there was a hose which I think had helium coming out it, and it was like a snake all over the floor. And so I called Ralph Moon, and he came out and fixed what needed to be fixed. But yes, only very briefly. Is the ORR still in operation?
Oh, no. For those of you that don't know, the ORR was the transition reactor between the graphite reactor and the HYFER. And some of the very first instruments at the HYFER came from the ORR. Yeah.
That picture, I think, of Ernie Walland and Cliff Shull that you see so often is, I think, at the ORR.
Oh, it is? Okay.
The graphite. I don't know. I may be wrong about that.
Yeah. Well, it's so great to see you, and I'm glad you've gotten to travel the world.
Yes, it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Randy Fishman, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, Sharon. It's great to see you.
One of the theorists. Are you still in the theory group?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Oh, great. That's wonderful.
Didn't you also get a new car? It was like a pink or a yellow car at your retirement. I thought there was some, like a convertible or something like that.
A toy car? Or a real car? No, I didn't get either that I recall.
Oh, okay. No, I thought there was something about
somebody else's party car.
No, I think it was yours.
I don't
Anyway.
remember a car, Randy.
I loved your talk.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Good seeing you.
Thank you, Randy. Does anyone else have a question or comment for Sharron? All right. Well, Sharron, I want to say thank you very much. Oh, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead, Adam.
I
Hey,
said
Mom,
in Los Angeles.
thank you guys for letting us crash your party over there.
I said that you got to come in to and see and who's waving her hand back there?
That's
Hi, Sharron.
well, I just wanted to say that I thought that was really fascinating. It was interesting to finally understand, Mom, what you did all those years, because I remember you and Dad sitting around the dinner table and discussing the HYFER or the tokamak and all this stuff, and I was like,
I wasn't the
what are my parents talking about?
There's okay. Well, thanks, Adam. I'm really glad you got to join in. That's great. Bye.
Bye.
There's Jula Aries. Jula, hi.
Hi, Sharon.
Did you see?
Great to see you.
Your invention.
It was everybody. We just, you know the story, yeah. It just happened over the weekend.
No, it's a treasure. It's a treasure. I really was surprised, but very, very grateful to you all for all the work you put in on that. It's great.
Well, too bad Chris is not around, but it all happened in his garage.
Wait, is Chris not at the lab anymore?
No, he is. He is. But we are all
reading, right? I see.
And I don't know whether he got a notice or not. But Hans should be around also.
There's Hans.
I'm here. Sharon, it's so good to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation. It was really awesome, and it's really a reflection on what somebody can accomplish in a career by being there and moving from one area to another and contributing at so many levels. And it's a really nice reflection of your career. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful thing for me to have those opportunities. I wouldn't trade it for anything else. It was great. Thank you.
We're glad to have you.
I was also one of the makers of that little country style computer that I have. And Jula.
The pictures that you had are just amazing. I was sitting here and wondering how you collected all that.
Actually, I still have the computer, so I still have it on display Bill brought it up, actually. It's sitting right beside me right now. But it's a treasure that I think I'll never part with. So we made new pictures of details. It's really funny. You guys wrote up a news release too that came out a little bit later that talked about, I think our director at the time was Wadsworth, and you called him John What's-worth.
Right. Right.
Really clever.
And John Cook became John Can't Cook.
That's right. Can't.
Can't cook. John Can't Cook. Yeah. It was really nice to see the pictures of what the Heifer Hall used to look like. All these things that we tend to forget, how much things change over time. When you're there every day, it seems like nothing ever changes, but some things do and some things don't. It's quite amazing.
Do you spend much time at the Heifer Hans?
Not in the last few weeks.
No, I guess not.
It's been an unusual time, of course, for us. But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Very, very, very wonderful to see you, Sharron. Hope to see you again soon somewhere. We'll run into you at the store or something.
So let's do that.
Now let's try to get together.
Eventually, when you get back to the lab.
Yes, it sounds like we definitely need to have you back to the lab once the restrictions are eased
I would
for
love
both a tour of Heifer and perhaps SNS.
I would just love that. I thank you. I was at the SNS, it was under construction, and got to put on a hard hat and work boots to walk through some of the tunnels. It was amazing, but I would love to see it in operation now.
Very good. Chris Redmond, you're next on the list. Do you want to come on real quick for your comment?
No, I really just wanted to say thanks for the great talk, and it was good to see you. And I forgot how just hearing your voice, it just brought up a lot of good memories. But good to see you.
Are you at work? Are you?
Yes, unfortunately, I am.
I thought it looked like you might be. So you're in the Heifer building right now?
I'm actually in a trailer, so they I think I inherited your office.
Did you?
So yeah, when they moved you out, then I inherited your office, and I think it's now a lunchroom, but it's
a lunch in the Heifer.
Oh, you're at the other end, yeah. So yeah, we inherited that wing, and but I remember you distinctly being there, very well dressed and professional, and
that was something I meant to mention. People back then, women wore dresses and hose, stockings, and men wore coats and ties. It was a different time.
Yeah.
Everybody dressed up a bit.
So glad to see you doing well. I think when I knew you, your son was entering into college.
My first son.
I remember you being very much in debt or something.
Oh, that's why I was at full time. They were going to go to college. I knew that. So full-time work helped out.
It's good to see you, Sharron. Bye-bye.
Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Marie, if you're still on, Marie Yao, if you would like to come on, we'll give you a couple seconds to respond.
I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you.
It's a wonderful talk, and thank you so much for sharing with us. It's very inspiring to see the early things and to share your story with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was a time when change was just happening every day. Everything was growing and becoming more technically oriented. It was just a wonderful time to be at work, that period of 40 years. I'm sure it still is the same for all of you, though. You're all probably doing new things every day.
Yes, that's part of the what I love for this job. So thank you for sharing your story, Ms. Sharron.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Marie. Janice Greenwood, are you still on? And if you do want to come on, I'll give you a couple seconds. Otherwise, I'll keep moving down the line. Dave Gerd.
Dave Gerd. Dave Gerd. Dave, are you there? I don't know.
Dave, we cannot hear you. If you could get back closer to your microphone or make sure you're unmuted, please. I'm not sure this is working. Dave, if you want to keep trying, I'm going to move down the line, but if we see or hear you pop up, we'll allow you time to speak. Steve Hartman, do you want to say anything to Sharron? Again, I'll give you a few seconds.
Hi, Sharron. So I've been in data acquisition at S&S and HIFER for the last number of years. I joined after you had left the lab, but I heard of you very quickly when I started in the role, and just wanted to say you set a high bar for those of us that came afterwards. That the automation that you were able to achieve.
Always ready to help, Steve. Yep. I enjoyed helping, and I enjoyed solving problems. So that was a good position for me to be in.
The automation that you achieved with those old computers. Set a bar high for us that we have access to a lot better technology, a lot new technology, but we're still trying to do the same things that you were able to accomplish with PDP. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Steve.
And also, hello, Dave Gerd. It's good to see that you're here as well.
Dave Gerd. Dave Gerd is now in Canada.
Yes, he is.
Victoria, Canada. Vancouver, Canada. And he worked at the SNS.
Yeah, so Dave hired me. So as he was retiring. So
really glad to see you, Steve.
So Dave, I'll send you an email.
Thank you, Steve.
Nice to see you. Bye.
Matthew Tucker, do you want to come on for a moment? I'll give you a minute.
I'll just very quickly say thank you very much. It was a very inspirational talk.
Thank you, Matthew.
I originally worked with Neutrons in the UK, and I came over here, and we're building on the great work you've done. And I still program Fortran, and I was.
Do you still use Fortran? That was
it's still the one I learned and the one I like. But
I like it. It makes sense, doesn't it? Especially for scientific computing, I think. I don't know what else people use now other than Fortran, but
whenever I wonder why most columns are important, and Fortran 77 is those cards that you looked at remind us of why we.
Yeah. It's important.
And I was also very interested in that they would, when you had your children, they would let you do flexible working. You worked part-time and then half-time. That was very good.
That was one of the lucky events of my life, that I was allowed to work just a little bit, just gradually get back into it, and it made it possible for me to eventually go full-time, but that was important, to be able to balance the home and the work for me without feeling like I was neglecting my children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Dave Gerd, do you want to give it another go?
Dave, I don't know if you can hear us, but it's great that you tuned in. I would love to see you. Dave and Pam were good friends from a group that my husband and I are actively involved in, called the Rationalists of East Tennessee. It's a group of humanists, free thinkers, but we actually do quite a lot of activities with them, and Dave was part of that. I may be outing you, Dave.
Unfortunately, Dave, we're unable to hear you still. So if you want to keep trying, that's perfectly fine. Otherwise, we'll move on to Adam Axel. If you would like to, and I apologize if I did not pronounce your name correctly. If you want to come on, you're welcome to. I'll give you a few seconds if you do. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just stay off, and I'll move down the line if you don't come on. Sharon Adam says, thanks for the excellent talk. I'm a neutron scientist, scattering scientist working with Jaime. He has done a great job showing me some of your historical HIFER pictures and making me familiar with your excellent contributions to neutron scattering at ORNL. Your talk drove the latter point home even more.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, Adam.
And Steve Hicks, do you want to hop on for a moment? If not, that's okay.
Hello, Sharon.
Steve Hicks. Hi.
Yes. Hi. It was really great to see you and hear the talk. It takes me back a lot of years. I remember working at HB1 and carrying a beeper at that time near the end of that project because my oldest son was about to be born.
Oh my goodness, you were ready.
So that's a milestone when you can think back to something like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of time has passed now. And are you still working at the lab, Steve?
Yes, I joined the SNS project about 15 years ago, and so I'm up on the hill now with the SNS. So that it's been a good experience.
Are you there right now? Are you at home?
No, I'm at home.
Okay.
And so I think probably 90% of us are probably home. That's just sort of out the back.
Yes, yes, very nice. Yeah, I wonder when you'll get to go back. But I do remember working together, and it was a pleasure. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and I even got to tell people about in our group just recently about the stack of cards, the punch cards.
Oh yeah.
Because I used to use those at Clemson on an IBM 360.
Oh yeah.
And they told us that same thing about drawing a line across the top, just in case you dropped them, you could get them in order quickly. You have the picture of that.
Hands, but we had our tricks, didn't we?
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. So we got a message from Dave Gerd. He's not sure why the camera and mic won't work, but he could see and hear everything.
Oh,
and says he'll be in touch by email. And he also says hi to Steve Hartman.
Steve Hartman, yeah, yes.
Cassie Sabins or Sabins, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name right. If you'd like to turn on and say hello to Sharron yourself, you're welcome to. I'll give you a few seconds. Otherwise, we'll keep going down the list. Cassie says, thanks, Sharron. Such a wonderful talk. I feel inspired listening to what you accomplished.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Suzanne Willoughby, are you still on? And do you want to say anything more to Sharron?
Suzanne was in the computer science division. I think she knew a lot more about computers than I ever did. And she keeps on going too.
She appears to have had to get off the computer. So, but she said, thank you. So good to see you. And Lillian Mashburn says, great talk.
Thank you, Lil.
Lillian, do you want to turn on your video?
I have to tune in. There she is. Hi, Lil. I didn't know you would be. Hi, John. Lily.
We knew each other from college, and
yes, we're contemporaries from. We went to UT the same
together, right? And in later years, I've spent quite a bit of time at the lab when I was at the university.
Oh, good. Okay, I didn't know that.
All over the place.
Yes.
But my aunt, it was Catherine Sims at the time, worked at the computers in 4500 back in the mid 50s, 54, 55 time frame. She was a mathematician and worked at programming in the
now, what was her name again?
Catherine Sims. But
yeah, I'll have to look at it, but she had to be involved with that homemade computer that they had called the Oracle.
Yes, it was. It was the Oracle that she worked on.
That was a monster in size, but in power, it was a tiny little ant.
Well, I got to see it, a group of high school students. I was a member of the Jets in high school, and I've been an engineering groupie most of my life. But we toured the lab back in probably 64 time frame, and we did go through and see the Oracle.
That's when I started to work there, Lil. I don't recall coming across you there. No,
no wait, it was earlier than that. That was college era. I was in high school, so that would have been 60, my junior year.
Okay. Well, that's nice. Where did you go to school?
Holston.
Oh, local.
And Knoxville.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you got to visit. And John, you worked there a lot, didn't you?
He's still working there.
Actually, I still am. I'm working from home on the new second target station for the SNS.
Oh, that's marvelous! Wow. Well, it's an impressive machine, or multiple machines, I guess. The SNS is an impressive development. And Lil and John are also close to us as neighbors. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Sure, we'll see you on the street.
Yeah.
Thank you, John and Lillian. Xiaosong, do you want to come on?
Dave Gerd. I see.
Xiaosong says, thanks for the excellent talk, Sharron.
Oh, thank you.
And Billy, do you want to come on? Billy Weimer. Billy says, thank you for the wonderful talk. You're truly an inspiration.
Oh, that's very good to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give another moment or two. Does anybody else want to ask Sharron anything or comment anything?
Hi, Dave. I see your screen, but I mean, I see your initials, but nothing else.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Lee, do you want to put your microphone or video on?
Lee is the guy who gave us the brilliant idea.
Hi, Sharron. Mary and I are here listening.
Hi, Sharron.
Mary, how wonderful to see you.
Oh, how wonderful to hear your talk. You were very impressive.
Yeah, and I was impressed by that young lady in the orange dress from the 60s.
My goodness, yes, I was very young.
Well, cute then and cute now, so a few things changed. But we enjoyed your talk a great deal. Great to know you for all these years.
Yes, thank you, Lee and Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pronounce this horribly, I'm sure. Delith Gossett.
Delith Gossett. A niece in Texas. Delith. Hey, there are your initials. There she is.
I just thought this was so wonderful to hear the respect that your colleagues have for you and all the wonderful things they had to say. It was really fun to hear. And thank you for letting us come along too.
I didn't realize you could, but I'm very happy that you were able to. Thank you for looking in, Delith. It's good to see you.
You too. This was wonderful.
Delith is a law professor at Texas Tech. I guess you're not going into this college at all now either, right?
No, we're still, we are moving June 1 to phase 3, where we can have limited access, but we'll have to do safety checks, like they'll take our temperature and things like that coming in. And then we have to be there only limited times. So we're trying to figure out next fall and what we're going to do then.
Well, I hope things are clearer then.
Me too. Me too. Well, we're not sure what we'll do, but we'll muddle through. So this was just wonderful. It was so wonderful hearing. I love the old pictures.
Oh yeah.
And that was really, really neat. So I wrote a little while I was watching, I'm going to send you all an email. I wrote a little picture book while we were watching this about you, you being a pioneer. So I will send that to you this afternoon for your
Thank you, Delee.
review.
Thank you. It's wonderful to say hi to all the family.
I will do. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Delee. Monique, do you want to pop on?
Yes, I'm here. I want to say thank you, Sharron, Melissa, Jaime, and Tina on behalf of WINS. This was a great production and super stories, and what great people to work for, and you are so inspiring.
I was very fortunate with the people I worked with. They were all top-notch and kind. Hi, Monique.
Hey.
Thank you so much for arranging this. And Melissa and Tina have been big help in making sure everything worked. It wasn't easy.
Oh, we still had some surprises, didn't we? But we got through it. Everyone that's still on, we tried about 4 or 5 different test runs with this, and then new stuff happened today as we were going. So thanks for hanging in with us as we changed up how we were going to do everything. And thank you for your participation. I want to also thank Monique and Shelley for helping to moderate today's event. To Jaime for his suggestion that we contact you in the first place. For Tina also, again, helping us figure out what Teams is doing and why, and in some cases just how to work around it. And Sharron, thank you so much for putting up with all of the technological challenges, but also just for coming to us and sharing your story. And this has really been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
You're very welcome.
See you in person someday.
Absolutely. No, I hope to help show you around SNS in the not too distant future.
Yes, that sounds.
Right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And just a reminder for anyone still on the video, we have recorded this. We will make it available. And again, thank you, Sharron. We appreciate you greatly.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Right. You're welcome. All right, everybody. Oh, Jaime.
It's Jaime. Hi, Jaime. We can't hear you.
Get your microphone.
Yeah,
Jaime.
it was wonderful. Thank you very much for doing this.
I loved it.
And okay, thank you, Sharron. Thank you.
Bye.
Sharron, a new comment from Steve Hicks. The triple axis upgrades were one of the best projects that I worked on in my career at ORNL, and you were a part of that. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending. We're going to go ahead and conclude this event. Thank you again, Sharron.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right. Bye.